funds from the markets and hold onto their money until the storm passes. According to the OECD estimates, the annual investment gap in developing countries for basic infrastructure, food security, climate change, mitigation, health, and education is around $4.2 trillion. But from which sources this money should come? This is the biggest challenges the world economy and the world as a whole is facing. So still, it is encouraging to see the strong determination of nations, especially from leading nations to be actors in their policies towards the developing nations. In terms of the Turkic Investment Fund, this is newly established financial mechanism of the Turkic-speaking states. You know that the integration of the Turkic world culturally has been existed from the long time. Turkic world has always been in a united world culturally, and after the independence of Central Asian countries and Azerbaijan, their independence, and with Turkey as the most developed country among the Turkish states, political integration also has developed dramatically. We share the common geography, we share common history and everything, and a single information area. Of course, economy is our top priority to make our economies closer to each other and more interconnected. And our country established Turkic Investment Fund as the main financial mechanism to ensure the economic integration of the Turkic world more. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Mr. Hisar Çiklioglu, we heard from you earlier, but I invite you now to make your comments. We did have some discussion. I know that there was a meeting in Ankara just the other day. There was a big emphasis on small to medium enterprises. I look forward to hearing your thoughts.
Thank you, Melinda. So again, I will make my speech Turkish. Please use your earphones. Hepsi değerli fikirli isimlerden oluşan, ufkumuzu açan, her biri food for thought kıvamında görüşleri aldık. Bundan da geniş perspektif sundular. Hepsine de teşekkür ediyorum. Ben de iş dünyası açısından yaklaşacağım bu konulara. İçinde bulunduğumuz asırda ticaret sadece iktisaden değil, siyaseten de önemli hale gelmiştir. Zira şunu hepimiz görüyoruz. Küresel değer zincirlerinin parçası olan ülkeler daha kolay ve hızlı büyümektedir. Bu yüzyılın başında Türkiye'de bunun somut örneğini sergiledi. Avrupa Birliği'nin dönüştürücü etkisiyle Türkiye bu bölgenin İtalya ile Çin ve Hindistan arasındaki bölgede sanayi devi haline geldi. Rusya ve İsrail'de kapsayan bu bölgede. En çok sanayi ürünü üreten ve ihraç eden ülkesi haline geldik. Pek çok sektörde otomotiv, beyaz eşya, konfeksiyon başta olmak üzere Avrupa'nın ana tedarikçisiyiz. Şu an Avrupa Birliği kendi dışında en çok otomobil ithal ettiği ülke Türkiye. Biraz önce Marto'nun da söylediği gibi Türkiye kendi markasıyla %100 IP hakları bizim olan elektrikli otomobil üretmeye başladı. İnşallah önümüzdeki sene Avrupa yollarında da Türk markasını taşıyan TOG'u Avrupa yollarında görmüş olacağız. 1996'daki Gümrük Birliği'ne geçiş Türkiye'yi pozitif olarak etkilemiştir. Çok sayıdaki sanayi sektörünün ve firmamızın seviye atlamasını sağlamıştır. Bu esasında şunu göstermektedir. Ticaret zenginleştirir, korumacılık fakirleştirir. Özellikle gelişmekte olan ülkelerin istikrarı ve refahı için ticaretin daha serbest olması şarttır. Dünyaya entegre olmuş, iş yapma ortamını iyileştirmiş ülkeler hem daha zengin hem daha huzurlu olacaktır. İşte bakın, iki büyük dünya savaşını çıkartan kıta Avrupa, harabeye döndüren, dünyayı birbirine bela eden Avrupa, iki tane büyük savaşı çıkartmış Avrupa, önce kendi aralarındaki ekonomik birliği kurdular. Birbirlerine düşman olarak değil, ticaret partneri gözüyle baktılar. Sonra itirafları ve savaşı sona erdirdiler. Ve nihayet hep beraber zenginleşiyorlar. Avrupa'nın son 1000 senelik tarihine baktığımız zaman Avrupa'nın kendi içinde savaşmadığı 50 sene bile yok. Ama kurdukları bu ekonomik birlik sayesinde tarihte ilk defa Batı Avrupa 80 senedir kendi bölgesinde savaş görmüyor. Çünkü ticaret en büyük barış kaynağıdır. Ticaret yapan savaşı konuşmaz, birbirine kötü bakmaz. Dünya Bankası'nın bir raporuna göre artan ticari bağlantılar aşırı yoksulluk içinde yaşayan küresel nüfusun oranının yarı yarıya azalmasına yardımcı oldu. Aynı şekilde gelişmekte olan ekonomilerde verimliliği ve istihdam artırırken enflasyonun kontrol altında alınması yoluyla yaşam standartlarını da yükselttiler. Tüm bu nedenlerle ülkeler arasındaki ticari engeller kaldırılmalı, birbirimizle ticareti artırmalıyız. Kurallara dayalı bir küresel ticaret rejimi kurmanın tüm ulusların yararına olduğunu da görmeliyiz. Dünya Ticaret Örgütü küresel ticarette belli bir düzenin gelmesini ve uluslararası ticaretin gelişmesini sağlamıştı. Ancak Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nin Dünya Ticaret Örgütü'nü devre dışı bırakma girişimleri sonrası giderek etkisiz hale gelmektedir. Bu da ülkeler arasındaki anlaşmazlıkların ortak bir platformda nispeten daha adil çözülmesinin önünü tıkamaktadır. Üstelik tek taraflı tarifeler belirleme yoluna gidilmektedir. İş dünyası olarak küresel ticaret sisteminin güncellenmeye ve reforma ihtiyacı olduğunu inanıyoruz. Serbest ticarete karşı kamuoylarındaki tepkinin altında yatan nedenlere yanıt veren kapsayıcılık ve kalkınma ilkelerine dayalı bir Dünya Ticaret Örgütü reformunu destekliyoruz. DTÖ'nün küresel ticaret konularında başat müzakere ortamı haline getirilmesini de arzu ediyoruz. Öngörülebilir ve kurallara dayalı bir küresel ticaret sisteminin istikrar ve refahın yayılması yoluyla dünyadaki barış ortamında güçleneceğini düşünüyorum. Burada önemli bir konuda başlığımızın ticaretin kolaylaştırılması. Bu kapsamda Türkiye Cumhuriyeti Hükümeti'ne teşekkür ediyoruz. Türkiye Odalar ve Borsa Birliği olarak Türkiye'nin kara gümrük kapılarını yap, işlet, devlet modeliyle modernize ettik. Böylece altyapıyı iyileştirdik, sınır geçişleri kolaylaştı. Şu anda bekleme süreleri ve işlem süreleri tam 4 misli azalmış durumda. Modernize ettiğimiz gümrük kapılarındaki geçiş hacimleri arttı. Bekleme süreleri 4 misli azaldı. Esasında da bu bir kazan kazan projesi oldu. İhracat yapan firmalarımız daha hızlı gümrük geçişi yapmaları sayesinde lojistik maliyetlerini azalttılar. Devletimiz için hem bütçesinden ilave yük getirmedi hem de artan işlem hacmiyle daha fazla vergi aldı. Cebinden para çıkmadığı gibi cebine para girdi. Ve Birleşmiş Milletler tarafından en iyi kamu özel sektör ortaklığı projesi olarak dünyaya örnek gösterildi. Bir numaralı proje çıktı. Şimdi bu modelimizi çevre coğrafyamıza da yaymak için harekete geçtik. Bu kapsamda her türlü katkı vermeye de hazırız. Bu düşüncelerle sözlerime son verirken sizleri tekrar saygıyla selamlıyorum. Burada ortaya çıkan görüş ve fikirlerin hepimiz için en iyi şekilde istifade edilmesini diliyorum.
Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Mr. Schuman, you've had the benefit of hearing from most of our contributors, bar one, so far, as the president of the CEO of the German Federal Association for Economic Development and Foreign Trade. What have been your impressions and your comments for today?
Well, first of all, I would also like to thank the organizers of the forum for inviting me to take part in this panel. This is the first time for me at the Intelligent Diplomacy Forum, and I must say that I'm quite impressed by the presentations, panels, and discussions I have witnessed here. Impressed because one can sense a sincere effort at this forum to jointly discuss and search for solutions for peace through diplomacy. And I think in these times, peace building is paramount. Making peace should be the top priority. Because if the global community does not succeed in preventing a further escalation of the conflicts that haunt us, there's no need that we hold this panel and talk about new ways to economic recovery, because there won't be any recovery then anymore to talk about in a long time. And I note here a remarkable difference to the Munich Security Conference, which took place in Germany 2.5 weeks ago. There everyone was talking about nothing but security, but from all we heard, the feeling that remained was one of lingering uncertainty. So making peace was not at the center of discussion there, and perhaps with the exception of the speech held by Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi, it was not raised. Now, MSC has a motto since many years, which is peace through dialogue. But however, part of a genuine dialogue is engaging with voices that challenge you and your beliefs, that at times may even feel like an imposition, that force you to get out of your comfort zone. If you try to avoid this, you run the risk of turning your dialogue into an echo chamber, and I think in Europe we move too much in echo chambers at the moment. The diversity of voices, which is a prerequisite for genuine dialogue, is what I see here, and I therefore wish that more participants from Germany would have made the effort to come here. I mean, Jens Plötner, advisor to Chancellor Scholz, had to cancel at a short notice. This forum deserves to become much better known in Germany, and we will work towards this. But come to the topic of today: what can international trade, connectivity, and interdependence contribute to peace building and economic recovery? Let me give you a brief outlook from our point of view. We are a think tank and a business association in Germany. We've been around for 21 years and work in more than 70 countries. And we bring together entrepreneurs from Germany with entrepreneurs from different cultural backgrounds. We match people who can ideally also do business with each other. And our focus here is on the people with their respective cultural backgrounds and their respective cultural values. We do not lecture them, but listen carefully to their consensus, to which we then devote a lot of time. We call that economic diplomacy. And from the experience of more than 2 decades of doing this, we can say that this bridge building work not only helps to bring about economic growth, it also promotes peace and understanding at a personal level. And we firmly believe that international trade, connectivity, and interdependence contribute to this. Take the European Union as an example. I'm very grateful you mentioned that. It was created under the impression of the horrors of the Second World War. It has long been a success story for peace and prosperity in Europe through regional integration. And now it is no secret that this European Union is not in a good state at the moment. There are a lot of reforms needed, but despite all the justified criticism I heard here as well, we must not forget what we can still learn from it. And we should not give up hope in it prematurely. I mean, Viktor Orban said on your panel yesterday a beautiful sentence, that it is not a matter of writing off the EU, but of helping the voice of reason to regain a majority back within it. We will have elections of a new European Parliament in June, and we might well see new majorities that could put new focus on reindustrialization, job creation, and a path back to economic growth for the 27 member states. But also, let me not be too Eurocentric here. Another good example of how connectivity, trade, and interdependence can go hand in hand is a Chinese Belt and Road Initiative. It had its 10th anniversary last year and led to significant economic benefits. Even in Germany, if you look around, the Duisburg area, it created growth, it reduced poverty through connectivity, and at a time when the West was receding from large infrastructure projects, And I'm not repeating Chinese government talking points here. I mean, you have to point that out in Europe all the time now. I'm quoting from an excellent study and analysis of BRI at 10, which was published last year by the Global Development Policy Center of Boston University. And last but not least, to address the question mentioned here, whether the facilitation of border crossings and the simplification of visa procedures can help address the slowdown in trade, yes, we do believe so. And we have been campaigning for visa liberalization for many years, for investors, business people, scientists, young talents who want to come and contribute to value creation in Germany. It should be made easy to come, not difficult. And I know that this issue is of particular importance to Turkey. And I think that Germany has a special responsibility toward the Turkish people in this regard. I mean, Germany's economic rise would not have been possible without the hard work of millions of Turkish citizens in our country. And even today, Turkish citizens and Turkish entrepreneurs in Germany are still making substantial contributions to value creation. So we owe Turkey a debt of gratitude for this. And on a broader scale, there's also much room for improvement when it comes to our visa procedures with regard to other countries. And when we raise the topic, as we have done for years in the past, we often hear from politics about reciprocity. No offense. Reciprocity being the fundamental principle of all diplomacy. But I think extraordinary times call for extraordinary measures. And again, it doesn't harm to look to China here at the moment. They are showing us how to do it by declaring unilateral visa-free travel regimes and policies for citizens of more and more countries in order to boost their economy. And they call that unilateral opening. There's a theoretical concept behind it that it's worth studying and considering. Because sometimes, and I think especially in times of turmoil, what is needed is diplomacy with courage and with backbone, and not reciprocity. And I think you can learn both courage and backbone from entrepreneurs and from the private sector. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We've heard quite a bit of discussion and comments about digital trade fueling the global economy, as Mr. Tang eloquently put it. So let's hand over to you, Hanzade Doğan from Hepsi Barada, for a very unique perspective on exactly how it is. Certainly fueling the reduction in my economy, that's for sure, living in Istanbul.
Sayın Cumhurbaşkanı Yardımcım, Sayın Başkan, distinguished guest, very honored to take part in this conversation. Let me try to also wrap up what I heard around the table. I fully agree with President Hisarcıklıoğlu that trade can solve many problems. I also heard from our Vice President as well as from Mr. Ali Yusuf that the world has changed. The global order that we are used to after the Second World is almost over. And it did bring us a lot of peace, growth, globalization. We established United Nations, World Trade Organizations. We did have a pretty good period. It looks like the party is over and we need to start thinking other measures. When we talk about trade, it used to be since the 80s that trade was an output of, trade was above foreign policy. So you would have bilateral trade agreements and foreign policy would follow. It's the other way around now. Now foreign policy forms and then forces trade to follow. So if talking about trade tariffs, regenerating WTO will not suffice. So when we talk about trade, we need to talk and think about geopolitics and political order of our new world. This is my first point. My second point is, when we talk about trade, as Mr. Tang mentioned, rather than thinking in the traditional sense of trade in goods and services, we need to start thinking trade in data, in software, in tech services. Geopolitics can prevent trade in goods to grow in the short term, but if new AI-based apps cross borders and reaches global audiences, we can go back to a golden age of trade with technology. And as a tech enthusiast, tech entrepreneur, I passionately believe technology can solve many of our global problems, from climate change to pervasive government debt to immigration. But there are two risks we need to think about. The one is geopolitics can overtake tech innovation, tech-driven growth as well. What I mean by this is we can be forced into a simple US versus China block, because the technology, big tech, became a tech nationalism in US and also in China. So these countries are forcing nations to choose between one of the bloc. And this is not sustainable, because all nations want strategic independence, all nations want freedom to act. So for the tech-driven global growth to be sustainable, fair, and benefits all nations, there needs to be another way of this US-China bloc. Nations need to have their own technology strategy, their own innovation, and collaborate and trade. Everyone needs to be in tech integration and technology trade rather than being part of a bloc. The second threat I see is the big tech, the so-called big tech. These technology companies have gathered such power and such economic might that they are bigger than many states, and they have leverage on all states. So how nations find a way to, to give other technology companies innovation to grow from their nations against this big tech. And I want to, this is a big challenge. All jurisdictions, from EU to Korea to every country I know, is trying to find the right balance to protect innovation, but also to, how to deal with tech. There are some Nordic countries who appointed diplomats in Silicon Valley to deal with Google. I think, no, can you believe? So when I say these companies are bigger than countries, it is a fact. I think Norway has appointed the first, if I'm not wrong, the first diplomat in Silicon Valley. And our government, I think, is exemplary in this situation, because they took this issue very seriously, and with very nuanced, progressive, fair regulations, they have balanced being an open economy, liberal economy, but at the same time keeping a fair playing field for innovation to thrive. So I thank them for their commitment and vigor on this issue. And to wrap up, as I said, our hope is again technology, innovation, integration, cooperation, but with a new mindset. With a new mindset that I have to repeat, because I think it's an historical sentence. Our president first used it, I think, in 2013. The world is bigger than 5, bigger than 7. In my specific e-commerce industry, bigger than 2. So we are an 8 billion humankind, and I hope we find shared values of fairness, sincerity, and work for global peace. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. We have already just gone over time, but we are able to extend in this room for another 10 minutes. If any of our participants need to leave, please don't feel obliged to stay. I know that everyone has competing commitments, but I did just want to give our panel an extra 5 or 10 minutes to respond if anyone has any responses to make. Please, Mr. Vice President.
Thank you very much. First of all, I am very happy to be part of this very lively and very useful discussion. We heard many interesting comments. Just a few points. First of all, I believe that there is no substitute for good domestic internal policies. We should start from our own policies and correct ourselves so that we can contribute to regional or global discussions. We have seen this in Turkey. Without reducing uncertainties internally, without creating political stability and credibility in your policies, you cannot be successful, either domestically or regionally and internationally. Over the last 2 decades, we have managed to grow around 5.4% annually, while the global growth annually was 3.6%, so 1.8% above global averages over 2 decades. And that has been achieved by political stability, credibility, predictable policies, and internal safety, security. So no substitute for correct, good domestic policies. Second point, anti-inflationary policies. They may be somehow growth limiting in the short term, but in medium and long term, they need for sustainable growth. We shouldn't be just focusing on the short term, we should also consider medium and long term. And also, I believe that these anti-inflationary policies are not only good for economic predictability, they are also necessary for social welfare, permanent, sustainable social welfare. So we shouldn't be blaming anti-inflationary policies too much for limiting growth, but the composition of growth is also important. How do we, the elements of growth, if we have the good policy mix set up, we can manage a reasonable growth with, together with fighting inflation, and this is possible. About this political relation between politics and economy, it is very interesting to hear different views. I do completely agree that we should have a political economy perspective. Economy, trade affects politics, and politics affects trade and economic relations. There is an interaction between those two. If we find a peaceful solution for Ukraine-Russia conflict, if the disastrous things on the ground on Gaza ends, if we have a stability at the Horn of Africa, if actually many regional problems are resolved, geopolitical problems, we will definitely have a better environment for growth and trade. No need to say about this. And we need more diplomacy, not more bombs. And we should underline that nobody gains from war, conflicts, but everybody gains from fair peace. And we would like to see this in Caucasia, in Africa, in Middle East, in every part of the world, for humanitarian reasons as well as for economic growth, prosperity of the whole world. So diplomacy is not only important for politics, it is also important for economy. There is a two-way interaction. EU-Turkey relations, we definitely have possibilities for a positive agenda. I thank Mr. Schuman about this emphasis on visa liberalization or facilitation at least. If we are going to increase trade and economy, we need to simplify the life for people, especially for business people, for students, for researchers, for cultural people. why do we, make this? And Turkey is part of customs union, but unfortunately we face very, very important difficulties, and I thank you for your emphasis on this point. We also need to renew our customs union, of course. It is a win-win, but unfortunately, due to largely political considerations, we cannot achieve to renew this customs union. If we could do this, this also would be a good contribution to EU future and also EU-Turkey relations. So thank you for your emphasis. Another thing I would like to emphasize is digitalization, and we live in a different world, technological developments. It is not just goods trade, it is services or intangible trade, let us say. So there are lots of opportunities for this. Even distant countries can trade with services through digital infrastructure, but we have to make smart regulations for this. Not individually, but also collectively, we should consider about these issues. The last but not least, Mr. Tang has made a perfect presentation, actually. I believe we need such an approach in all international institutions. More inclusive not only in terms of geography, but also in terms of including SMEs, women, young people, different sections of society. We need to have this inclusive international governance structures. And I think Mr. Tang has made a good exemplary presentation on this. We will work together, Turkey and WIPO, to further develop these issues. Property rights are not just, elite subjects. They are also related to our daily life for large sections of society, for a more innovative, for dynamic, future. So thank you very much again. I really appreciated all these discussions. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I know that everyone has a busy Antalya Diplomacy Forum ahead of them, so I will wrap up and allow everyone to move on to their next scheduled appointments. But thank you, of course, to our dignitaries, our distinguished guests, our panelists. Thank you. And to you, our audience, thank you for joining us.
almost 35 years, I have been with Bloomberg and seen it develop. And we are now the biggest market data vendor in the world. We cover data, we cover analytics, and we cover news. But we wouldn't be anything without the 350,000 users we have globally. So to all of her customers, I say thank you. We regularly host roundtables with heads of state, senior ministers of finance and foreign affairs, and ambassadors. And we do this across the globe in both our offices in London, New York, Tokyo, Hong Kong, but also in sort of events such as this, where we can meet with people and help facilitate perhaps the dialogue that doesn't always happen in such a direct format. And I think today, Turkey is especially important because it is a gateway not only between Europe and the Asia-Pacific region, but also for the Middle East and Africa. And it plays a strategic part in the geopolitical position that it holds. On top of that, I think 2024 is going to be an extremely interesting year for us globally. I think it's close to 1 in 4 of the population actually votes this year, so that equates to about 4.2 billion people. And so today we're going to discuss how these events will impact our foreign and diplomacy decisions, given the background of financial markets, rising inflation, foreign direct investment pressures, and just simply uncertainty. Because whilst economies are still recovering from the global pandemic, we're still actually dealing with the fallout from 2008. And we have multiple geopolitical wars. We also have new challenges that didn't even exist in 2008. Obviously, the green agenda is huge, but we also have things such as artificial intelligence and digitalization. We'll talk today, therefore, on how we can create new partnerships and work together as businesses and foreign policy makers to promote global stability and growth with the uncertain backdrop of 2024. Now, sadly, I don't expect us to solve the world's problems in an hour today, but hopefully we can put forward some ideas. And before I hand over to Minister Şimşek, I'd actually just like to give you a few housekeeping rules. Today, this event is strictly Chatham House rules, so it's off the record. There is no media, so please be as interactive and vocal as you like. We really want to get everyone to participate as much as possible. So, Minister Şimşek, I'd like to thank you once again for taking the time in your very busy schedule. You must be extremely jet-lagged. I understand you were in Brazil recently. And I'm sure we'll get on to some questions about that. But let me hand over to you. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you for putting together this small but hopefully very productive roundtable meeting. Yes, I did travel from Sao Paulo last night, so my body is confused a little bit. But I'm in good shape. I was given, a context as to what to, at least in my, initial remarks, what to cover. So I have a number of issues to cover. Since I'm back fresh from G20, let me give you a little bit of top-down perspective. Global growth is resilient, but there are significant asymmetries among countries and regions. If you take a cyclical short-term perspective, actually the outlook is a little bit more benign because soft landing seems to have been achieved. This is good news. Disinflation continues, and that set the stage for global, to some extent, global monetary easing. So that's less of a headwind for some of the emerging markets like Turkey. But structurally, the world is not in good shape. And it's unlikely to have a meaningful improvement in the medium term. What are the key structural issues? There is obviously geostrategic competition. among some of the big guys, countries, which means trade fragmentation is the new normal. Aging populations is a reality. Rising inequalities is going to be a major source of political political dislocations. High global indebtedness at a time when there is talk of higher for longer is clearly a source of distress. And looming climate crisis. Now, all of these are going to keep global growth in check. These are speed limits for global growth. If you look at the World Bank, IMF figures, we are faced with the lowest 5-year growth prospects, meaning 5-year forward-looking, of the past 20 to 30 years, depending whose numbers you use. So clearly, structurally, we have an issue. Now, when we talk about trade fragmentation, Salihan did talk about some of the issues. Pre-global financial crisis, global trade was growing at 2 times global growth. So global trade was the engine of global growth. That engine is sputtering. Global growth is now, global trade growth is now barely at par. In fact, in many years, last year, for example, it wasn't. For this year, it's going to be almost at par with global growth. So it's no longer an engine. Pre-global financial crisis, annually, we had about 300 trade protectionist measures. Now we have 10 times more, 3,000. It's crazy, but it's real. So friendshoring is the new fad, new trend. So clearly, we have the weakest recovery in global trade of the past half a century. So this should be a cause for concern, and I don't really see a fix for it. And it's not unique to, by the way, trade of goods. It actually covers services, it covers investments, and it even covers financial flows. We know certain countries that have restrictions on their banks to finance external projects. It's strictly limited to, subject to approvals. Aging populations, it's another big issue. I've highlighted, we've talked about it, but, if you go back to 1950, the share of 65 years old as a percent of total population was only 5%. It took us 73 years to get to 10%. But it's going to take us 20 to 30 years to double this. I'm not talking about 5 to 10, I'm talking about 10 to 20. This is very dramatic. And I don't think countries are ready for that. Rising inequalities. Look, top 10% of world population owns 76% of wealth, 52% of income, and accounts for 48% of global emissions. This is top 10%. When you look at the bottom 50%, they account for only 2% of global wealth and 8% of global income and account for 12% of global emissions. This is not a just world, okay? What can we do? On trade fragmentation, clearly we need to reconnect, but this geostrategic competition gets in the way. We have a hegemon power and we have a emerging superpower, and they're clashing, and it's creating big shock waves. Now, when it comes to inequalities, certainly there are things we can do, but we're not doing. What can we do? We can obviously deploy more progressive tax system. There are those who call for a global wealth tax, but that's quite a complicated issue. I think if we invest in people, upskilling, reskilling, it would help. Look, until now, quality jobs was mostly, allocated or earmarked for those with college degrees. But with the advent of AI, I think college degrees are going to be in trouble. So unless we take actions, unless we come up with new thinking, I think, again, it's not just trade fragmentation. Inequalities are going to be, and within the context of these elections, this is really where I'm worried. Now, another speed limit for global growth, prosperity, is high global indebtedness. Global debt over the past decade has increased by more than $100 trillion. To be exact, a decade ago, global debt was $210 trillion. Today is $313 trillion. Now, you may say, this is nominal, so what's the big deal about it? Well, as a percent of GDP, it has also gone up dramatically. The world average debt to GDP is 330%. That's a pretty high number. When interest rates are 0%, it's no big deal. But when interest rates are high and look set to stay high, I think we're in trouble. Emerging market debt to GDP average is 255%. Advanced markets is 377%. Here I have to open a bracket and give myself a bit of credit. No, I'm just joking. Debt to GDP ratio in Turkey is 110%. By the way, this includes private sector debt, public sector debt, corporate debt, meaning household debt, etc. So this is gross. But let me tell you where I'm really worried. There are 52 countries, according to the IMF, that are currently in debt distress. And this is bad. So we're not talking about a debt crisis. We're talking about a development crisis. So debt crisis will translate into a development crisis. And this is what really worries me when I look at around the world. So I think access to financing, even at these prohibitive interest rates, it's going to be an issue. America is spending like there's no tomorrow. And if that is the case, with such a huge appetite, US treasuries are going to stay high for a while. When US is offering 5%, 4%, how can you compete? It's not easy. So today, 3.3 billion people live in countries where interest on debt, meaning debt servicing, interest servicing, is bigger than the money that is put in education and healthcare. The world is in trouble. I'm telling you, because clearly there's even, I just came back from G20, there's not even agreement on how to tackle countries that go into debt distress, because China wants different ways. The Americans have different approach. We are in somewhere there. So it's selective and arbitrary. So there's no even agreement how to address if a problem emerges, let alone fixing it fundamentally. Another tectonic shift, which I alluded to earlier, is the technology, is the AI. We know that technology leads to productivity. Wow, that's really great news. So if you are one of those who subscribe to productivity bandwagon, as some people would say, great. The reality is, I think we now know that technology does not automatically create shared prosperity. It does create prosperity, it does. It's just not a shared one. And this is, I think, could be another source of inequalities among the countries and within the countries. So when we talk about inequalities, we're not talking about just, between the countries. So according, again, to the IMF, clearly we read a lot from those guys, AI is likely to create quite a bit of dislocation in employment. And 60% of jobs in advanced economies and 40% of jobs in the world are at risk. So another source of income and wealth inequality, if it is not handled well. And there is not yet really a consensus as to how to deal with this. Now, the last point I'd like to make, I mean, the political, the elections this year, the political noise. So 2024, as Salian was talking about, is going to be the largest election year or cycle in the history that we know of, with 70 elections worldwide affecting half of world's population, 60% of GDP, if you weigh it. Oh, great setting for nationalism, populism, protectionism, perfect backdrop for backlash. I hope that is not the case, but clearly we have a sluggish growth and we already have tight financial conditions and we have a high debt burden. So politicians are going to come up with really easy, quick fixes because that's what politicians are. When I remember Trump, it reminds me 3 walls, nothing. Just to make America great, you want to build a physical wall with Mexico. Easy, because if Mexicans don't come, then our wages are going to go up and America is great again. And if Muslims don't come to America, we are safe. Our identity is safe. And so let's build a visa wall against Muslims. Easy, okay? So we're safe now. And of course, a customs wall, meaning tariffs, against China. Industry is back, and we are great again. So simple, so easy, such a great fix. And of course, that's how he got elected. So there you go. We'll get more of these in many countries. In particular, I'm worried about Europe, where far right is on the rise. And far right, the rise of far right, is counterproductive to solution to European ills. Europe need talent. Europe need people who would serve, produce things. And guess what? The far right doesn't want that. So, future of BRICS, I was asked. I'm going to cover all the ground because I usually do my homework. Look, BRICS, it looks like it has expanded to include Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and UAE. Saudi Arabia, I asked their finance minister, and he said they have not yet signed final agreement, so I guess having a second thought. But anyway, if you look at BRICS, if you look at GDP at market prices, BRICS countries, they account for about $27.2 trillion, or roughly about 26% of global GDP, which we would say, okay, it's only a quarter. But when you look at on a PPP basis, it accounts for 35% of global GDP, 35. And it's bigger than G7, which accounts for 30% of global GDP on a PPP basis. And population-wise, of course, needless to say, because of China and India, that BRICS account for 45%, or 3.6 billion of global population. And BRICS combined, they post a current account surplus of $261 billion a year, I mean, at this last year, compared to a deficit of $553 billion for G7 countries. But when it comes to markets, of course, BRICS don't feature that well. You know, G7 accounts for roughly 72.3 trillion of global market capitalization, compared to only 16.8 trillion for BRICS. So how about Turkey? You know, so we live in a new world, actually, but we don't know which sort of new world. I told my Italian friend, I said, do you know Gramsci? He said, yeah. I said, do you know what he said about where we are today? And he said, no. So I said, look, he tells us that the old world is dying. The new world is struggling to be born. Now it is the time of monsters. We live in times of monsters. So, where does Turkey fit in? Of course, it depends who you talk to. But since I'm a minister, let me make a case for where Turkey is. We believe that a peaceful and prosperous region is in our best interest. Why? Simple. We think we are a well-diversified economy, you know, good industrial base. We like trade integration, you know, a gateway, as you said, to Europe, you know, Central Asia, Africa, usual promotional campaign, I mean, leaflets. But no, seriously, we are a major player in global construction. We have completed over $500 billion worth of infrastructure projects in 133 countries over the past 50 years. Not bad. So we are only second to China in the number of companies in the so-called global engineering news, whatever, ENR, whatever, engineering news magazine. We're only second to China. So there you go. Well, if there is peace, it's better for us. War tends to get in the way. So we tend to benefit from trade and doing things rather than destruction. Plus, of course, this is a claim, of course. I think one advantage that we've inherited from Ottoman Turks is that we were not engaged in classical colonialism, okay? When we did conquer places and people were not happy with us, okay? But we certainly didn't destroy their language, didn't destroy their religion. You know, of course there was some continuity and some disruptions, but I mean, the Greeks hate us for that period, but the Greeks exist. Their language exists, their religion exists, you know, they're still there. So are the Romanians, they're our neighbors, we like them. But I mean, so they may hate Ottoman, but Ottoman didn't destroy their identity. So I can tell you, when I travel to Africa, you know, I feel like there's plenty of warmth because they don't see me as a representative of former colonial power. Don't get me wrong, I'm just speaking about Turkey here. So, and we have a strong global diplomatic presence. Our soft power is arguably so-so, but this is Antalya Diplomacy Forum. Apparently, we're only third. We have the third, you know, largest diplomatic presence in the world after China and the United States. And of course, now we also, thanks to embargoes from our friends, from our NATO allies, you know, including, you know, US and Germany and others, we're grateful for them because they pushed us. And now we have we are somewhat an emerging power in defense and aerospace industries, hopefully going forward. So we would like the world to be a peaceful place so we can sell more stuff and do more stuff and prosper together. So that would be my take on where Turkey fits in all this. I'm going to stop here.
No, that's brilliant, Minister. Thank you so much for that. And I think you touched on some key points that I hope there will be questions flowing from. But to sort of kick us off, and you kind of touched on it, but where do you see within the sort of increasing pressure of deglobalization, where do you see sort of Turkey and Turkish diplomacy within the global dynamics? You've sort of said that they were the third after China and was it the US in terms of diplomatic presence. But do you think there is a bigger role that the country could play given the lack of dialogue and the lack of, as you said, of agreement following the G20? Is there something more that can be done?
We certainly, if you look at what we do rather than what we preach, and preaching something is easy, doing something is more difficult. Look, we are against, for example, Russian attempt to grab land, on a daylight. So we agree with Ukrainian, we support Ukrainians' territorial integrity, for example. You didn't ask me, I'm just giving you how, rather than preaching, how we actually act. So we support Ukraine's territorial integrity. We are against annexation of Crimea. We've been there from the day first. But we think ultimately this has to be resolved at the table. Russia cannot win, cannot lose, and cannot stop. Ukraine cannot win, cannot lose, and cannot stop. Because they're more than what we see. And therefore, we would rather try to see if we could help facilitate peace by being able to talk to both sides. I know our Western friends don't like that. But, it's in our personal interest because we can't afford to decouple with Russia. Decoupling with Russia will have a devastating impact on us. It's a big neighbor. There are geopolitical issues in Syria and elsewhere, but more than that, we can't afford to live without Russians coming to Antalya because we have a large current account deficit. And we buy a lot of natural resources, so we need to see if we could sell some stuff. So our Western friends, they want us to join them, and but we do not allow, for example, Russia to have access through Turkey to sensitive goods, to get support for its military industrial. But certainly other than that, we would rather have good neighborly relations with both Ukraine and Russia, and hopefully be at some point, someone that they could both trust, that we could help them see if we could narrow the gap. So this is really how we see ourselves.
Yeah, no.
I mean, you may say, well, I'm touching difficult issues here. You may say, well, you don't have a similar stance when it comes to Gaza, but Gaza situation is very different.
Yeah.
I mean, look, it goes beyond, Israel's need to protect itself against terror. We've seen the carnage. We've seen the violation of every single norm and rule. So that's different. It's not just because we are, sympathetic to this or that. It is simply, it's not what, our Western friends would like us to believe. So this is really where we're coming from. So we would rather, for Israel to have a genuine peace, it needs to allow space for Palestinians with dignity, if you're sincerely interested in peace. So the true friends actually try to get Israel to do that. So these are the two difficult subjects. I gave you, my answer to how we behave rather than what we say.
No, I think we appreciate your candor there, and thank you for that. I think let's turn, if I may, more to some of the people around the room. We have representatives from financial services, from businesses. I think one of the questions that I'll put forward, and then hopefully we can get some participation from others, is how do you see financial services playing a role in 2024? I mean, you spoke about trade being a big part of Turkey. Financial services, perhaps slightly smaller, but where can it do more, and how do you see it interplaying?
Probably, let me start with this. Last few years have been very difficult because we pursued a policy mix that was in defiance with, rules of gravity. And we're back on Earth, so macro-financial stability is a priority for us before we can even talk about developing. The other day when I was looking at different models around the world, what is striking is that if you go to the United States, what you see is companies, they tap, 60% of their capital is raised from capital markets, as opposed to relying on commercial banks. So reliance on commercial banks and similar entities is 40% versus 60%. So capital markets dominate. Let's go back to Europe. Europe is exactly the opposite. 70% commercial banks, 30% capital markets. Guess what? US usually, even if it is like the center of the earthquake, like global financial crisis, they get out quickly. They respond decisively, they get out, and Europe struggles. Dismal growth, dismal market performance. Guess what? We are even worse than that. In Turkey, companies rely on banking system, which is extremely short term, in tune of 88%, only 12% capital markets. But you cannot develop capital markets without conquering inflation. It's not enough, but it's a prerequisite, meaning Europe has conquered inflation, but doesn't have the type of capital markets vibrancy. But for us to develop capital markets, for resources to go to more productive sectors, less speculative areas, such as gold, last year Turks were like obsessed with gold, $30 billion of gold imports. Anyway, the point I'm making is we have to achieve price stability. And price stability means low single-digit inflation on a lasting basis, a target that has been very elusive. It was within the grasp a decade ago. Literally, we were there, literally. And then things unraveled. So my point is, financial markets, financial services, is like the bloodstream for the economy. You cannot do without properly functioning markets. Of course you need heart, but what's heart there if you don't have blood? So of course it needs to pump it, it needs to circulate it. So clearly, markets matter, and what's holding us back, in the case of Turkey, is the deficiencies that are the root causes of macro-financial instability. And so this is exactly why we have this medium-term economic program that we have unveiled in September last year, that I was one of, obviously, personalities involved in designing it. It's a teamwork. So we do have a roadmap. The problem is, there is some representative of business community here. They all give me lip service. They come and visit me. They say, Mr. Minister, you're a great person. And I say, I'm not. And they say, we fully support you. And then they go out and do exactly the opposite. So the program ownership is problematic. Exporters want subsidies.
Yeah.
They want weaker exchange rate, poorer people, but they don't want to innovate. They don't want to enhance productivity. No, those are difficult stuff. Why would they do that? When you can get interest subsidy or, devaluations. Why? Why bother with productivity? Why bother with innovation? Why bother with even working? This is the mindset from the top to the bottom.
Would you say that's a cultural thing?
I don't know, but clearly we've had an episode where they enjoyed, at the expense of 86 million people in this country, there is subsidies. They're not going to get it.
Excellent. Right, I'd like to throw it out to the floor. Who has a question for the Minister? Liam. Yeah, sorry. I can just about read that. Please, go ahead.
Should it be a question or just a comment? Because
Whichever you prefer.
whichever I prefer. First of all, Mr. Minister, thank you very much for your insightful observations today. I appreciate very much. I am the country representative for IFAD. IFAD is in the International Fund for Agricultural Development. We are a UN specialized agency as well as an international financial institution, focusing primarily on rural development, agriculture, fisheries, forestries, etc. You outlined sort of a worrying scenario for the globe, effectively, with rising inequalities and aging population, climate change. All of these issues are clearly very, very relevant, and they're particularly relevant, I believe, for the poorest segments of the population across the globe. Not necessarily in Turkey, the level of development here is extremely high, but if you look at some countries in South Asia or sub-Saharan Africa, we can really expect there to be a rising disparity with these people being left way behind. My plea to somebody like you engaging with peers at the G20 fora, etc., is to do everything possible not to leave these people behind, because they represent a vast majority of the population in this globe. A second and final observation, you mentioned the warmth with which ministers receive you in Africa because of a different structure, colonial versus non-colonial powers, etc. I believe that Turkey has enormous potential to develop trade with emerging economies through, for instance, South-South and triangular cooperation opportunities.